We are prisoners of desires we built ourselves. Sigmund Freud. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. A man walks through the labyrinth of his desires, barefoot on burning sand, chasing water he can never drink enough of. Freud once said that desire is the pulse of human existence, a silent force pulling strings beneath the surface. It is not just hunger or thirst, not just the craving for touch or warmth. It is the restless stirring inside, the ache that never sleeps. Desire is not a path to freedom. It is a chain, wrapping tighter the more you pull. You reach for one thing, then another, but each satisfaction opens a new hollow space. You drink, yet remain thirsty. You eat, yet feel empty. You love, yet the void inside gapes wider. This is the great paradox of desire. It promises fullness, but delivers craving. We live in a world where wanting has become an identity. People are taught that to be alive is to want more success, more attention, more love, more approval. But few stop to see that this wanting is not freedom. It is addiction in disguise. Freud spoke of the unconscious as a seething cauldron of desires, boiling beneath the surface of our polite smiles. And the more we suppress these desires, the more power they gain in the shadows. Imagine a person who dreams of success. They work tirelessly, sacrifice sleep, health, and even love, believing that one day they will rest. But the horizon always moves. As soon as they achieve one goal, another rises, taller and more distant. Desire multiplies itself. The more you feed it, the hungrier it becomes. We are not just pulled by personal wants. We are surrounded by a culture that whispers in our ear, telling us what to crave. From childhood, we are shaped into consumers of life itself, taught to measure worth by what we acquire, achieve, or conquer. But beneath all this noise is a deeper truth. Much of what we chase is not our own. True desire does not roar. It whispers. It rises quietly from the depths of who we are. Not from fear, not from emptiness, but from presence. It is the desire to create, to love, to express, not to fill a void, but to offer something from within. But most people never reach this. They are trapped in a cycle of craving, forever mistaking hunger for meaning. The real prison is not outside, it is inside. It is the invisible leash we wear, the restless mind that never stops asking for more. And the tragedy is this: the more we obey it, the more it owns us. Freedom does not come from killing desire, it comes from seeing it. To look at desire without judgment, to understand its roots, its games, its masks. This is the first step. When you can stand in the middle of your wanting and not be swept away, you begin to taste a different kind of power. Desire is part of being human. But when it becomes the master, the soul shrinks. When it becomes a companion, the soul expands. The question is not whether you have desires, it is whether your desires have you. And so, as the sun burns the skin and the thirst gnaws from within, the journey begins, not toward the next drink, the next touch, the next conquest, but inward, toward the source of all this longing, the heart of the labyrinth, where freedom waits, not at the end of desire, but beyond it. Inside every human being lives a storm. Freud mapped this storm into three forces: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is raw, primitive, hungry. It knows only what it wants, here and now. The ego stands in the middle, trying to navigate reality, balancing desire with consequence. The superego hovers above, the voice of conscience, of rules, of inherited morality. Together, they form a delicate, restless triangle, and within this triangle, most people are torn apart without even knowing why. The id whispers, "I want." The superego hisses, "You must not." And the ego, caught in the crossfire, negotiates, twists, and bends, always seeking a fragile peace. But the peace never lasts. This inner battle explains why so many are exhausted, why so many feel at war with themselves. The problem is not the existence of desire, but the war between wanting and forbidding. Take the example of someone who longs for love but fears intimacy. They crave connection, yet when it approaches, they sabotage it, push it away, or drown it in drama. The id reaches for touch, the superego recoils in shame, and the ego dances in circles, unable to reconcile the split. This is not freedom. This is captivity, a life spent bouncing between extremes, never resting in wholeness. Beneath these inner forces lie the scripts we inherit. A child learns early which desires are permitted and which are condemned. Over time, they bury parts of themselves, locking away anger, lust, ambition, even joy. These exiled desires do not die. They sink into the shadow, waiting, and in the shadow, they grow teeth. What is the shadow? Carl Jung, following Freud, called it the disowned self, all that we push away, deny, or disapprove of. But the shadow does not stay silent. It leaks into dreams, slips into sudden moods, emerges in projections onto others. A person who disowns their own anger will see anger everywhere. A person who denies their ambition will resent the ambitious. In this way, the shadow shapes the world we see, the choices we make, the lives we live. To break free, one must turn inward and face the shadow. This is terrifying, for it means meeting the parts of oneself that feel dangerous, shameful, or dark. But here lies the key. What is denied becomes destiny. What is faced becomes freedom. Not all desires are traps, but most desires are tangled in the web of the shadow. They are not true desires. They are echoes of wounds, reactions to pain, attempts to compensate for lack. A person may seek power not from genuine strength, but from a desperate wish to never feel helpless again. Another may seek love not from fullness, but from an aching fear of being unworthy. True desire, in contrast, is clean. It arises from the core, not the wound. It does not need to conquer, prove, or fill. It is like a river flowing from a deep spring, not a flood rushing to erase a drought. And this is where the practice begins, learning to tell the difference between what arises from fear and what arises from truth. Many spend their lives running from this question. They collect achievements, experiences, relationships, but the hunger stays. The moment of awakening comes when a person stops and sees, I am not hungry because I lack. I am hungry because I have never met myself. To stand before one's own reflection, without flinching, without apology, is an act of profound rebellion. It is here, in this naked seeing, that the chains of desire begin to loosen. You begin to see which wants are yours and which are borrowed. You begin to sense which hungers lead you home and which only lead you deeper into the maze. This work is not easy. It asks for courage, patience, and above all, honesty. But it offers something no temporary satisfaction can: the slow, quiet birth of freedom. Not the noisy freedom of having everything, but the quiet freedom of needing less, because you are no longer at war within yourself. At the heart of it all is this truth: you are not your desires. You are the space in which they rise and fall. To remember this is to return to yourself, to reclaim the ground on which you stand, no longer as a prisoner, but as a sovereign. Desire, at its root, is not the enemy. What poisons life is the refusal to understand where it comes from and why it drives us. Most people do not live their own desires. They live the desires implanted by parents, culture, media, and society. They chase images that were handed to them long before they could choose. The perfect partner, the perfect body, the perfect success story. But perfection is a mirage, and the chase is endless. Imagine a person scrolling endlessly on their phone, comparing, judging, envying, longing. They are no longer connected to their own life. They are swimming in a sea of borrowed wants, drowning under the weight of other people's dreams. Freud understood this trap well. the endless cycle of want and disappointment, where satisfaction is brief, but craving is eternal. The most profound shift comes when a person begins to question what is mine and what is not, what arises from the core of my being and what was plastered onto me by the world. This is the beginning of spiritual maturity, the peeling away of the false to uncover the real. True desire feels different. It is quieter, more grounded, and strangely peaceful. It has no urgency, no panic, no need to grasp. It waits, like a seed under the earth, knowing that in time, it will bloom. When you are connected to this kind of desire, you no longer live in reaction. You live in response to life, meeting each moment from the inside out, not the outside in. To arrive here, one must pass through a fire, the fire of disillusionment, the realization that much of what was once longed for brings no peace, the realization that success without meaning is hollow, that love without presence is empty, that approval without authenticity is a prison. This fire burns away the false, leaving the raw, tender truth beneath. Without this burning, there is no transformation. The ego, left unchallenged, will continue its endless hunt for more. It will search for happiness as if it is a prize to be won, not a presence to be lived. But when the hunt collapses, something remarkable can happen. The person wakes up. Waking up is not an escape from desire. It is a deepening into it, a reorientation. You no longer crave as a starving beggar. You long as a full, living soul. You no longer demand life fill you. You offer yourself to life with open hands. This shift changes everything. Relationships stop being transactions of need and become meetings of being. Work stops being a frantic ladder and becomes an expression of purpose. Even pain softens, no longer seen as failure, but as part of the wide river of experience. You become less a hunter and more a participant in the dance. But this dance requires skill. It requires the ability to pause, to listen, to sense the difference between a true longing and an old wound disguised as a want. Without this discernment, you will always be pulled off course, seduced by promises that leave you emptier than before. The practice is simple but not easy. It begins with awareness. Notice the hunger when it rises. Stay with it. Stay. Do not run. Do not numb. Do not distract. Ask not what you want, but what the wanting itself wants to tell you. Beneath the surface craving, there is often a deeper need. The need to be seen, to be safe, to belong, to matter. When you meet these needs with presence, the surface desires begin to lose their grip. Over time, something astonishing unfolds. You become less entangled. The cravings still come, but they pass through you like weather, no longer hijacking your life. You remain anchored, clear, at home in yourself. And from this place, you can engage with the world without losing yourself to it. In the end, the secret is not to kill desire, but to love it wisely, to know when it serves you and when it enslaves you, to walk alongside it, neither shaming it nor surrendering to it. This is the path of inner mastery, not the elimination of longing, but the purification of it. You stand then, not as a prisoner chained to the wheel of wanting, but as a quiet witness, a compassionate guardian of your own heart. And this, perhaps, is the greatest freedom of all. The illusion of control is one of the most seductive lies in human life. People believe they are steering their own ship, choosing their own path, ruling over their desires. But often, they are not the master. They are the puppet, and the strings are pulled by unconscious forces deep within. Freud knew this well. He saw how people deceive themselves, imagining they are in control while being ruled by needs they barely understand. Picture a person who chases love, falling over and over into relationships that break them. On the surface, they say they want stability, care, connection. But under the surface, something else is at play. A hunger for chaos, a thirst for intensity, a need to reenact old wounds. They do not know this because they are blind to their own inner patterns. They mistake chaos for passion, Mistake pain for love. Mistake control for power. This is the trap of unconscious desire. You believe you are driving, but you are being driven. And the more you fight to control it, the tighter the grip becomes. You try to discipline yourself, force yourself to change, impose rules and structures. But without understanding, discipline collapses. You fall back into old habits because the root was never touched. Freedom begins not with control, but with clarity. To see the mechanism of desire as it moves within you, to witness the wave without drowning in it. This clarity creates space, a gap between the impulse and the action, a moment of choice where none existed before. Consider the person who always needs to be busy, always rushing from task to task, unable to rest. They tell themselves they are productive, hardworking, responsible. But often, beneath the surface, there is fear. Fear of stillness, fear of emptiness, fear of facing what waits in the silence. When they finally stop, even for a moment, the restlessness surges, the anxiety rises. And so they keep moving, not toward something, but away. To break this pattern is an act of great courage. It means pausing where you once ran, breathing where you once clenched, allowing what you once resisted. It means learning to sit in discomfort, not as punishment, but as practice. The practice of meeting life as it is, not as you wish it to be. As you do this, something begins to shift. You start to hear the quieter voices within, the ones drowned out by noise and urgency. You start to sense a deeper rhythm, a pulse that does not rush. You start to feel the difference between doing from fear and doing from love. And here is where real strength is born, not in dominating yourself, not in crushing your desires, but in standing steady in their presence. To feel the pull and not be pulled, to feel the hunger and not be consumed, to feel the longing and yet remain whole. This is not repression, it is integration. It is the folding in of all your parts, the wild, the tender, the lost, the fierce, into a larger holding. You stop chopping yourself into pieces, stop waging war against your own nature. You become spacious, wide enough to hold it all. From this space, a new kind of desire can emerge, one that is not reactive, but creative. This is the desire that does not come from lack, but from fullness. The desire to give, to serve, to create beauty, to bring forth what is true and alive within you. This desire does not enslave, it liberates. But it cannot be forced. It cannot be manufactured by willpower or positive thinking. It arises naturally when the noise quiets and the heart softens. It comes when you are no longer frantically reaching for the next thing, but when you have come home to yourself. In this place, life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. You still have desires, but they are aligned. You still have dreams, but they do not crush you. You still have goals, but they do not define you. You move from a place of essence, not ego. And when you stumble, as you surely will, you meet yourself with kindness. You see the old patterns, not as failures, but as invitations to return, again and again, to the ground of being. Over time, this becomes your way. To live awake in the presence of desire, neither enslaved nor at war, but free. There is a shadow side to every desire, a hidden face we rarely wish to see. Freud and Jung both understood that what we repress does not disappear. It waits. The parts of ourselves we exile become the architects of our fate, working behind the curtain, shaping our choices, our patterns, our lives. The person who represses anger becomes controlled by it. It slips through in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in sudden eruptions they cannot explain. The one who denies their ambition may find themselves sabotaging their own success or envying the boldness of others. The one who hides their vulnerability may harden into a shell, unable to truly connect. The more we push away, the more power we give. What we refuse to feel will eventually rule us. The shadow is not evil. It is not a flaw to be corrected or a disease to be cured. It is simply the part of us we have not yet brought into the light. It carries not just wounds and fears, but also gifts, intensity, creativity, passion, truth. To meet the shadow is to reclaim the energy once locked away, to restore the fullness of who we are. But this work is not for the faint of heart. It is easier to chase surface desires, to distract ourselves with pleasures and accomplishments, than to sit face to face with our disowned parts. It takes bravery to ask, what am I avoiding? What in myself have I disowned? Where am I living in reaction rather than response? Meeting the shadow does not mean acting out every impulse. It means feeling it, owning it, integrating it. The person who feels their anger can set clear boundaries without cruelty. The person who acknowledges their hunger for power can lead without domination. The person who honors their vulnerability can love without losing themselves. This is the turning point. When we stop dividing ourselves into good and bad, worthy and unworthy, acceptable and shameful, we begin to see that wholeness is not perfection, but integration. The dark and the light, the hunger and the restraint, the longing and the stillness, all held in one vast beating heart. True freedom comes from this integration. You are no longer running from yourself. You are no longer swinging between indulgence and repression. You are no longer building a life on top of buried pain. Instead, you become grounded, centered, able to move through the world without losing your own center. It is here that the deepest desires can reveal themselves, the ones that are not reactive but generative. The desire to grow, to create, to love, to serve, to offer something meaningful to the world. These desires do not demand that you become someone else. They call you to become fully yourself. And this is where many stumble. They imagine that to follow their true desires means to abandon responsibility, to break free of all limits, to cast off all restraint. But the opposite is true. Real desire thrives within form. It needs roots, discipline, commitment. A musician becomes free through practice. A dancer becomes fluid through repetition. A human being becomes whole through devotion to what matters most. Without this groundedness, desire turns chaotic. With it, desire becomes art. Without it, we spiral into addiction, obsession, compulsion. With it, we rise into creation, connection, contribution. So the path is not one of suppression or surrender, but of refinement. You learn to tell the difference between the voice of your wound and the voice of your soul. You learn to hear the signal beneath the noise. You learn to bow not to every craving, but to the deeper call within. This is how you stop being a prisoner of desire and become a master of it, not through control, not through denial, but through love. Love that sees clearly, loves wisely, and acts from the center. In this space, you begin to live differently. You no longer need to chase what the world tells you to want. You no longer need to prove or perform or possess. You begin to taste the sweetness of simply being, and from that place, you offer yourself to life, not as a hungry ghost, but as a living flame. Not all desires are created equal. Some arise from fear, others from love. Some are echoes of old wounds, others are whispers of the soul. The art of living is learning to tell the difference. Many people are ruled by inherited desires. They want success not because it fulfills them, but because they were taught that without it, they are nothing. They want love not because they are ready to give and receive, but because they fear being alone. They want beauty, wealth, or recognition, not because these things matter to their essence, but because they have been programmed to believe they do. To live wisely, one must slow down enough to hear the true voice beneath the noise. True desires are quiet, steady, patient. They do not scream, they do not rush. They arise from stillness, from the ground of being, from the simple joy of expression. You recognize them not by how loud they are, but by how right they feel. Imagine the difference between wanting to create art because your heart is overflowing versus wanting to create because you need applause. One liberates you, the other traps you. Imagine the difference between working from a sense of purpose versus working from a need to prove yourself. One expands you, the other depletes you. To find true desire, you must first learn to pause. Before you act, before you reach, before you chase. Pause. Feel into the moment. Ask yourself where the impulse is coming from. Is it coming from lack or from fullness? Is it born of fear or of love? Is it pushing you away from yourself or pulling you deeper in? This practice is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong unfolding. You will forget. You will stumble. You will get caught in old patterns again and again. But every time you remember, you strengthen the muscle of discernment. Every time you choose the true over the false, the essential over the superficial, you come home to yourself. True desire does not enslave. It liberates. It calls you not to accumulate, but to become. It leads you not to possession, but to presence. It draws you not into chaos, but into coherence. It brings a sense of alignment, where your actions, words, and values flow as one. Without this clarity, you become a leaf in the wind, tossed by every trend, every craving, every passing temptation. With this clarity, you become like a rooted tree, flexible, yet unshakable, able to bend without breaking, able to grow without losing ground. It is tempting to think that the goal is to have no desires, but this is a misunderstanding. Desire is life's current. It moves through all things. The question is not whether you will desire, but whether your desires will come from the surface or from the depth. To live from depth is to live with intention. It is to choose consciously, to align your life not with fleeting pleasure, but with lasting meaning. It is to recognize that the most beautiful desires are often the simplest. To love and be loved, to create something that matters, to touch the world with kindness, to walk a path of integrity and truth. And when you fail, as all do, the work is not to punish yourself, but to return. Again and again, you return. You return to the pause, to the breath, to the heart. You return to the question, what matters most now? You return to the ground beneath your feet, the quiet knowing that you are enough, even without the next achievement, even without the next conquest, even without the next approval. In this return, you find resilience. In this return, you find peace. And from this peace, you live not as a prisoner of your desires, but as their master. Not by crushing them, but by listening, loving, and choosing well. The real treasure is not in having everything you want. It is in wanting what truly matters. And when you touch this treasure, even for a moment, you taste a freedom that no possession, no accomplishment, no external victory can offer. It is the freedom of being fully alive, fully here, fully yourself. Growth is rarely gentle. The moment a person begins to untangle themselves from the chains of false desires, they step into a space of discomfort. This discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is the pulse of transformation. When old cravings no longer hold their power, and yet the true desires have not fully emerged, a gap opens. In that gap, the work of becoming begins. This stage can feel like shedding skin. Like a snake rubbing itself raw against stone, we feel the ache of release, the sting of leaving behind what no longer fits. The ambition that once drove us feels empty. The pleasures that once numbed us taste bitter. The approval that once lit us up feels hollow. This is the pain of waking up, the disorientation of stepping into the unknown. Many turn back at this point. They rush to fill the silence, to chase some new distraction, to wrap themselves again in the comfort of old patterns. But for those who stay, who stand in the fire, a deeper shift unfolds. The person begins to feel into their own center, not the shifting surface of wants and fears, but the quiet core beneath. In this space, you start to hear the subtle voice of your own being. It is not dramatic. It does not shout. It does not demand. It waits. It speaks in stillness, in longing, in the deep pull toward what feels true, beautiful, alive. It is here that real strength is forged. Not the strength of willpower or domination, but the strength of surrender, the willingness to be reshaped, to be undone, to allow the old to die so the new can be born. This is the death every transformation requires, the death of who you thought you were, the death of the identity built on borrowed desires. When you let these false skins fall away, something astonishing happens. You no longer need to chase meaning. Meaning begins to find you. The small moments open, a quiet conversation, a simple act of kindness, the joy of creating without expectation. You begin to sense that life is not waiting somewhere ahead, but unfolding right here, in the raw and the real. True desire, at this stage, takes on a different flavor. It is no longer frantic or desperate. It no longer comes from a hole that needs to be filled. It arises like a clear spring, bubbling up from the ground of your being. It is the desire to love without clinging, to create without proving, to serve without sacrificing your own soul. This kind of desire transforms relationships. You no longer seek others to complete you or to fix you. You meet them as you are, and you allow them to be as they are. There is space for imperfection, for mystery, for growth. Love becomes less about possession and more about presence. Work, too, is reshaped. No longer a battlefield for ego, it becomes a field of expression. You are less concerned with success in the eyes of the world, and more attuned to the integrity of the work itself. Whether you are seen or unseen, whether you are praised or ignored, the satisfaction comes from knowing you are aligned with what matters. Even pain softens. It does not disappear, but it no longer defines you. Suffering becomes a doorway, not a prison. You learn to hold your own wounds with tenderness, and in doing so, you find compassion for the wounds of others. This is not a final arrival. There is no finish line, no moment when all longing dissolves. Desire will always live in you, as long as you are alive, but it becomes a companion, not a master, a guide, not a ruler. You walk alongside it, listening, learning, dancing with its rhythms without losing yourself to its storms. And so the journey continues, deeper and deeper, not away from life, but into it, not toward control, but toward connection, not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. In this space, you are no longer at the mercy of every wave. You become the ocean itself, vast, deep, and free. When the dust settles, when the noise fades, when the endless chase slows to stillness, what remains is startlingly simple. You stand where you have always stood, inside your own life, inside your own skin, no longer a prisoner, no longer a beggar at the door of the world. Desire has not left you. It hums quietly in your bones, a steady pulse, a living thread woven through your days, but it no longer drags you by the throat. It no longer whispers that you are incomplete, unworthy, unfinished. It no longer promises salvation in the next thing, the next win, the next touch. You have tasted something deeper, the freedom of needing less, the power of resting in your own presence. And in this resting, you discover a paradox. When you no longer chase life, life begins to come to you. Joy arrives unannounced. Meaning emerges in the smallest details. Love flows without demand. This is not the end of desire, but its transformation. You desire now not from emptiness, but from fullness. You give because you are whole, not because you are lacking. You move because it is your nature, not because you are restless. You love because your heart overflows, not because you are starving for affection. The world remains as it is, wild, beautiful, unpredictable, but you meet it with steadiness, with grace, with an open hand. And in that open hand, you carry the quiet treasure you searched for all along, the unshakable knowing that you are enough, just as you are. This is the heart of freedom. Not a life without desire, but a life where desire serves truth, where longing bows to love, where wanting becomes a song, not a chain. And so you walk forward, not as a slave, not as a master, but as a human being, awake, whole, and free. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.